This is Penn Woods interviewing for the Oklahoma Living Legends. It's June the 1st of 1979. I'm in Pawnee, Oklahoma, and I'm visiting with Mr. Orrin S. Palmer. I'm going to spell that because it's a little different from a normal spelling or usual spelling, maybe. It's O-R-R-I-N-S, like in Sam Palmer, P-A-L-M-E-R. What does the S stand for? Scott. Orrin Scott Palmer. And Mr. Palmer is retired. He has been a lawyer, and then he was later associate district judge for the district in this area, and we'll be talking a little about his personal background. I'd like to ask first who your parents were and how they came to this area.
All right. My father, Herbert Palmer, and my mother, Agnes Palmer, were born and raised, we'll say, in Pennsylvania. My father, after their marriage, worked for an oil company or with an oil company. And he was later transferred to Robinson, Illinois, where I was born. Then after that, in 1912, about 1912, he went into the rice business in Arkansas. So we moved to Arkansas, and there I lived until I was 12 years old. At that time, he went back to work with an oil company and was sent to Oklahoma, Cleveland, Oklahoma, and we lived there, and he and my mother both died there. We lived there, and I lived there until I came to Pawnee. Was elected office and came to Pawnee in 1939.
What was your mother's maiden name?
Agnes Donnelly.
Agnes Donnelly.
Donnelly.
D-O-N-N-E-L-L-Y.
Donnelly.
Now, I'd like to talk a little about growing up in you in the Cleveland area when you first came here.
Yes.
And of course, Cleveland was quite an oil boom town.
Oh yes.
I'd like to think back about some of the things that happened in an oil boom town like Cleveland, a small town that became an oil boom town.
Well, now let me add this: that the boom when we came to Cleveland was over. The boom, the drilling, and the boom, the rush was over. See, that was that started in somewhere in 1903 or 4, and by 1910, 1915, most of it was all over. As far as the boom part, and because most of it, well, in fact, all of it was saddle production. There was occasional well drill, but most of it was saddle production at that time.
You remember any of the oil patch things that happened in the area, even though there was drilling there still?
Yes, there was some. Occasionally they would drill a well somewhere, but by and large it wasn't very much of it.
I see. You recall growing up there some of the things that happened in your life early?
Well, no other than I suppose, just an average schoolboy, we'll say. I worked some in the summer and went to school in the winter, and I would say just an average. We were an average family, and I think I had an average kid's life. And until I was injured, and outside that, well, that's the only thing that I can recall. I can't recall anything about the town that would be. I knew some of the old timers who were over there, who were old men when I was a small boy, who were some of the original homesteaders.
Who were some of these you were talking?
Well, there was Bob Lunsford, was the old president of the First National Bank. He was there, I don't know when he came to that country, many, many years before that. And the Mullendores, E.C. Mullendore was the banker down at the Cleveland National Bank. And let's see, I was trying to think of some of the, I really can't think of anyone else unless I would be talking to some of those Cleveland old-timers. And then that's just about the whole.
Mullendores became pretty well known, and do you recall anything about the Mullendore family, or any stories or remembrances given to them?
Well, no, not any particular stories. I, of course, was on the bench when the Mullendore estate was probated, which gave you an insight to the family, and it's but not anything of any historical interest, I think, because all that is a matter of court record, could be examined by anyone.
Sure.
And then when I came to Pawnee, now I never knew Pawnee Bill. Pawnee Bill died prior to the time I came to Cleveland, to Pawnee, but I was reasonably well acquainted with Joe Barrera. Now, you never heard of Joe Barrera, did you? Well, Joe Barrera was world champion roper, and he was with the Pawnee Bill shows, and after the show disbanded, Joe Barrera came to Pawnee and lived out here near Pawnee Bill. Now, he was one of our last characters of that era. And but as far as court cases, as I told you, over 40 years, you know, there is such a mass of that very few stand out unless I examine the court record. Never, I could recall some of those stories and some of those people that were in court. But now, the days of the bank robbers and all that through this part of the country was prior to my time. See, we had bank robbers in this country. They used to rob the Jennings Bank down here and Tarleton Bank about twice a day sometimes. And those fellows were gone. And but the town at that time, when I moved to Pawnee, was about like it is today. Of course, the population may be a little larger, but not much. The town and the courthouse. Now, the courthouse was built in 1930. I believe it was finished in 1932. So I came in January of 39. So I wasn't here at the court building. We call it the new courthouse. It isn't new anymore, but we refer to it as the new courthouse.
Pawnee Bill couldn't have died much before you.
No, he didn't, because I say he could have died while I was here. I know we handled his estate was probated in court while I was on the bench. So evidently, you're probably right. It wasn't too long, or maybe he died after I came to Pawnee. But I never knew Pawnee Bill as an individual. Never knew him.
Well, it was after the accident in May. Lily had died, and he was on the way. He was kind of on the downtrend by the time you came here, anyway, from physical standpoint.
Oh yes, I think so. Now you talk about the accident. You mean when his wife was killed in
the automobile accident?
Yeah,
it was pretty bad. It hurt too.
I think so. Now, I don't know. I should know. Now, there's something else. I could examine the court record and tell you the day he died. But I know it isn't. I know it isn't. I know it isn't.
Now, you were blinded as a teenager, isn't that correct?
That's right, 17.
How did that happen?
That was tinkering with dynamite caps and not knowing what I was doing.
Were you working on a job? Or?
No, I was playing. Tinkering with when I didn't know what I was doing. In other words, we found 100 dynamite caps, and another kid and myself, and we tinkered with them and put a fuse in them, and you can see the results. Now, that's exactly what happened.
Did you go completely blind?
Well, yes. Now, I have not no vision, but I wear color glasses. I have sun bothers me. It's a glitter and a glare, but as far as seeing an object, I don't. And it's rather interesting. I do a lot of wood turning.
Oh, you did?
Oh, I spend 9 hours a day. I'd not spend 10 if I didn't have to stop and eat sometimes. I did it this morning. I've turned out some.
Now, tell me this: you were blinded at really a prime age for you.
I think so.
I wonder how did from the standpoint of your emotions, how did that affect you during that period?
Well, let me be as frank as I can with you. There was about a period of a year or two that I was about a half vegetable, if you know what I mean. Because to me, the thing was over. Life was over. That was the end of it as far as I was concerned. Now, it would be impossible for me to describe it because so you could understand, because that would be impossible. In other words, right now, if you became totally deaf or totally blind in a matter of a second, you know what?
What?
You know what emotions you think you'd know. Now, I didn't know, of course, but I found out. And then, due to my mother, well, I think that was the thing that she offered no sympathy or anything like that. I just had to get busy and decide some other way to make a living. And I hoped at one time as a kid, of course, well, all kids have ambitions of being a fireman or a policeman or a highway patrolman or an airplane pilot. I wanted to be a doctor and study medicine, and I thought surely that might happen. But after this accident, why, of course, that was out. And the attorney that I happened to know was visiting with me one day, and he suggested this. So that's the result of it. Now, as far as living a normal life, other than there's certain things I can't do. For instance, I can't pilot an airplane. I can ride a bicycle and skate and swim, but I can't pilot an airplane. But other than that, I live a reasonably normal life, and it's due to Gene's help and one thing or another all these years. And I haven't felt perhaps the handicap very keenly because of Gene over here. Gene's my right-hand man and the whole works. And she makes it possible for me to live a normal life. Now, I don't know how to explain all that. But
how do you ride a bicycle?
Well, I don't know what I meant by that. Just get on a bicycle and start riding. I can stay on a bicycle, and I know where I'm going, you understand. But if you give me 160 acres, I can ride a bicycle to the fence. In other words, I can ride the bicycle, because I've ridden the bicycle 1,000,000 miles before I could see. It's like my wood turning. A man was in my shop the other day and watching me. And he couldn't understand how you do it, how I could do it. Well, I said, let me be honest with you. I did this when I could see, you understand? So I know what the operation is in front of me all the time. I don't know how to explain that to you. But I know exactly what the wood is doing, what it looks like, and and what my tool is doing, because having watched it. So
you probably operate a great deal by feel.
Oh yeah, you operate 100% by feel. But I say though, the procedure is not strange. I know the procedure by sight.
Yes.
It's just like I read Braille, but I read Braille very slowly for this reason. I translate all the time, and I shouldn't do that, see. Now, a person who is totally blind all their life does not do that. In other words, I read A, B, and C in Braille, and I put that in print A, B, and C. Do you follow me?
Yes.
And if I read the number 97 in Braille, I translate that into the figure that you use, 97, say. Well, people who have never seen don't do that.
What were some of the difficulties in your educating yourself in those earlier years afterwards? Now, you had not had any college by 17.
No.
But you were just about ready for college.
That's right. But I had several years that I didn't know. I had a reader when I went to college. And then, so that took care of that. And I found no difficulty there at all. In fact, I've been one of the few extremely fortunate people who have managed throughout their life to have people around me who made life extremely pleasant one way or another. As a child, and as a married man, as a neighbor. I was telling someone the other day, I've been extremely fortunate in that, or Gene and I have, that we've always, no matter where we've lived, we had the best neighbors in town. So as a result, it's never bothered me a great deal.
Now, you went to, where did you go to college?
Cumberland University. That's in Tennessee. That's an old Presbyterian school.
And from there to law school?
No, see, that was back in the days when that was just strictly, it had been a university of some 100 years. I think it was established before the Civil War. Well, they had a law school there, and so they more or less, the rest of the school more or less faded away, and they maintained this law school. It has since merged with another college, so it is no longer there as a law school.
So you took your college and law school at Cumberland?
Yes, if you want to call it that.
Now, you mentioned something that, were there any particular difficulties in the college? You mentioned you had a reader that you worked with. Were you able to utilize Braille through college?
No, sir, not one page.
Had you learned the Braille by then?
Yes. I attended the Oklahoma School for the Blind for about 6 months in order to study Braille. Then I finished high school in my own high school. See, but then my work there, or my time there, was not spent so much in the work of the school. The idea was, or at least my mother's idea, and she was proven right. Prior to the time that I attended down there, I felt that I couldn't walk from one side of the room to another, you understand, without help.
Yes.
All right. And my mother's idea was, if you go down and see what those fellows do, it may help you. In other words, there's people down there, of course she knew that all blind people just didn't sit in a chair 24 hours a day, see. Well, she insisted I go. I didn't want to go. Well, when I attended school, I saw those blind kids doing everything under the sun.
You say you saw.
Well, yes, and now there you are. Now, see, I have always used that expression, because in reality, I don't see. But strange as it may seem to you, I have a mental picture of you. I have a mental picture of this desk, of your instrument. I haven't touched it. I know nothing about it. But when I walk in a room or meet someone, you say, there goes a red automobile down the street. I immediately see a red automobile. It may not look like the red automobile you see, you understand?
Yes.
But in my mind's eye, I see it moving down the street. You can say, there goes a black dog. I see a black dog. It's not the black dog that you see, but it's a black dog running down the street. Well, you form those, or I do, those mental pictures, everything that... Now, when you hear a football game on a radio, don't you see the football players?
Yes.
Oh, that's the same thing. It's identical. And and of course, necessity makes you do a lot of things, or you do a lot. I've always tried to do everything that I possibly could, at least try to see if I could do it. In other words, I don't like to say I can't do it. And
you told me one thing that before we went on tape that was particularly interesting and I think a fascinating story. You told me that you ran, I believe when you said you were in college, you ran for office and was beat by somebody who had died before the election. What was that?
Well, in the spring of '32, I was in school and I filed in Tennessee. And I filed as a state representative from the Pawnee County. Well, when I came back in June, I started campaigning. I had 3 opponents, primary opponents. And I don't remember when the primary election was, but I had 3 primary opponents, and I campaigned. I suppose I half campaigned, but I campaigned anyway. And people were so nice, I was going to get all the votes in the county, because everyone I talked to was going to vote for me. And I even felt sorry for my other 3 opponents, because there I had all the votes in my hip pocket and they were out working campaigning. Well, one of my opponents, after the official ballots were printed, a few days or a day or so after, one of my opponents died as a result of a heart attack. Well, they had the funeral and he was buried, and in a week or so, or 3 or 4 days, whenever it was, we had the election. When the votes were counted on election night, the dead man received more votes than I did.
Did he win?
No, he didn't win, but one of the others won, but I certainly didn't win. but he received more votes than I did. So I quit politics for, well, I hid for about 2 weeks, and then I quit politics for several years until 38, which would be about 6 years.
What did you do during that case?
I practiced law over Cleveland.
What kind of cases did you handle?
As a lawyer?
Yes.
Well, I didn't handle many because that was during the Depression, and you get a few divorces and a little real estate case now and then. There wasn't much going on. That was the days when lawyers wasn't eating regular.
Do you recall any your cases? If they were few and far between, you probably recall them the best. Do you remember what your first case was?
My first case? Yes, I can remember my first case. Now, wait a minute, I didn't have a case. 2 people came to my office and wanted a divorce the next day or so. I didn't have the slightest idea how to get into court, really, so I sat there and talked them into going back together again. I've never heard from them since. I don't know whether it worked or not, but it wasn't because I was such a good fellow. It was just because I didn't know what to do about it.
Did you get a fee out of that one?
No, I don't think I did. I can talk about those odd things. When I first came in office, about the first 2 or 3 days after I was in office as a county judge, 2 people came in my chambers one day and sat down. We visited a little bit, and I said, "What can I do for you?" And they said, "We want to get married." Well, it didn't dawn on me that judges marry people. I thought ministers married here. Of course, I guess I knew, but I never thought about it then. They said, "We'd like to get married." And I said, "Well, it's certainly all right with me." I didn't know who they were even. They had my permission. So we visited a little while longer, and I thought, well, they were sure spending a lot of time in it. Not that my time was so valuable, but so we visited a little, and I said, they said, "Well, we'd like you to get married." And I said, "Well, you go to a minister." No, they said, "We want you to marry us." Well, I almost fainted. I knew there was something you were supposed to say and do, but I wasn't sure. And I tried to remember what the minister said when I got married, and I couldn't remember a single word he used. So I knew you were supposed to stand up and hold hands, so I told him to stand up and hold hands. And I grabbed a hold of my desk to keep from fainting and mumbled some words until this good day. I don't remember what it was. And I didn't realize that you had to have witnesses. Well, lo and behold, there was no witnesses in there. What? And so after it finished, there happened to be a couple of lawyers standing in the doorway of my office waiting for me. And I said, "Did you fellas hear that?" And they laughed and said, "Yes." And I said, "Would you serve as a witness?" So they served as witnesses. But it wasn't 5 minutes till I had a marriage ceremony rehearsed and memorized. And so when I went across the hall to the clerk's office, one of the girls in the clerk's office said, "Those people were sure frightened about getting married." I said, "They wasn't half as frightened about it as I was." I said, "The only reason I didn't jump out the window because it wasn't open." And that was one of the things that stood out, and that's been 40 years ago. I can still remember. It's something I don't like to think about before I go to sleep.
Do you remember when you were a lawyer, what case stood out in your mind the most?
No, sir, I can't. They had a few divorces, and as I told you, some odds and ends, but there was nothing about them that was sensational as far as I was concerned. And
how about politics? You said you finally got back into running for something again.
Yes,
what was it?
That was county judge.
And that was when?
That was in 1938. I was elected in 38, and took office on I believe the 7th of January in 1939. And then I stayed in office all those years. I didn't have any opposition at any time, so.
Tell me this, here again we go back to the handicap, because I'm sure that not an awful, it'd be a pretty small percent of judges who are completely blind. Did you face problems where it came to restudying a case or something like that as a judge?
Now, I've been asked that question a lot of times, but I was fortunate to always have people around me who were dependable and for instance, in reading briefs, I always had a court reporter. And most of my girls were the kind that I could send them to the library for this book or that, whatever it was, and will you read the case, or they would, see. So I never found that a handicap. It just wasn't a handicap. And then, too, I talk about having good fortune. We have a wonderful bar in this county. We have a wonderful group of lawyers, and always have had. And as far as briefing the law, I guess I was lazy and let the lawyers do it for me. That's really what happened. And I might add here that I've been asked a question many, many times down through the years. How could I trust lawyers when I couldn't see? In other words, I'd sign them hundreds of instruments, dozens every day. And did you know, in all the years I was in office, I was never misinformed about what an instrument contained. And so having a group of men like that to work with, my job was comparatively easy.
I know it's difficult on 40 years to try to, and I'm not going to certainly ask you to rehash, remember a bunch of cases, but I wonder if any stand out. There must be in that period of time some that stand out as unusual cases.
Well, now, we've had cases involving children, which I suppose you'd say would stand out occasionally. I can't recall a lot of them now, but I could at the time. I mean, unusual in that. Now, I had a very pleasant visit some time ago with a man. He's a man now. And many years ago, the mother and father died within weeks of each other. Now, why, the reason, I don't know. But some state child agency at that time, I don't know what they called it, welfare, what it was. There was a 18-year-old boy, a 12-year-old sister, and about an 8 or 9-year-old brother, as well as I can remember. And they'd found foster homes for these children, the little ones. And the brother came to me and wanted to know if he could keep his brother and sister. And I said, well, son, you can't make a living for yourself. He said, would you give me a chance? And I said, certainly I'll give you a chance. So he hustled around and found a job. And I said, now we're going to find out about how you get along. All the years he maintained a reasonably good job, maintained a comfortable home. I know it was hard for a kid that age to do that. His brother and sister were in school all the time. He stayed with them, educated them, and later on, of course, when they were a lot older, he married. But now that's one, due to the fact that I visited with him some time ago. And those things like that stand out, or at least they do to me. Now, the rank and file criminal case does not. I have never dwelt much on that. We had a lot of them, but they didn't.
Did you have any sensational cases that became sensational statewide and attracted that attention because of the nature of what had
occurred? No, sir. Offhand, I can't think of it.
How about landmarks? Do you recall any landmark decisions, any decisions that may have that may have affected other cases down the line?
You mean that was filed in my court?
Yes.
No, sir. I know of no case that was a landmark case.
What about some of the people that you were associated with that may stand out in your memory in Pawnee area? You said you didn't know Pawnee Bill. He died shortly before. Do you recall any others who you remember well, lawyers or others?
Well, of course, I remember McNeil, who was on the Supreme Bench. He practiced law here prior to his going on the bench, and came back here and practiced law and died here. And Thurman S. Hurst was a member of the Oklahoma Supreme Court that practiced here many years ago, long before I came, and then he was on the Supreme Court when I came in. And later he came back and practiced law. And that's just some of the old attorneys that were here. And I think L.V. Orton was connected in some way with the Bill Murray administration. I don't know what, but outside that, I knew the McCullum brothers. And of course, I can name all the old attorneys, but that wouldn't be of any interest to anyone.
Carl McGee, I'm sure you knew.
Oh, were you? Mm-hmm. Carl McGee was, I called him, for a long time I called him Major McGee, and then I later called him Colonel McGee. Now, Colonel McGee practiced in my court prior to World War I, or II, and afterwards. He practiced in my court for a number of years after he retired from the service.
You've been active in a number of things in the community over the years. One, I think, is scouting. I know that you had received the Silver Beaver Award in scouting.
But see, we have had a boy who was a scout, Eagle Scout, and my interest, I think, in scouting. Now, I'll take that back. I was a scout myself. There's another distinction I hold that very few people have. I reached the rank of tenderfoot when I was 11, 12 years old, and I've maintained that rank ever since, and I think I'm the oldest tenderfoot scout in the state of Oklahoma. But, I was really interested in scouting. Now, the reason I was, I suppose, because my boy was, and I thought I should be, he was. What? Yes, I was involved in scouting in Pawnee here and in Cleveland long before we ever had a boy. And let's see, I was involved with the Red Cross during the war, and with the Ration board here, and I set up the original Ration board, and was on the various drives of one kind of bond drives and rubber drives and aluminum drives, and I don't know whether you're familiar with any of those or not. But I felt that I should do everything that I could, since I was full effort myself, you might say. I felt it was my duty to do anything and everything I could do to help the war effort, such as it was.
Now, you received the Sertoma Awards, their annual Service to Mankind Award, I believe.
Yes, sir. This was, I think, in recognition probably of a variety of different things. I imagine, yes. Of course, I wasn't I never discussed it with any of the committee or anything. They made their own private investigation, so I didn't know.
Yes. All right. I noticed a note that you have here, which says, "A token of thanks to a man who helped me without expecting help in return. I praise." Do you remember that, Jerry Owen? Is it Jerry Burns? Do you know what about that note?
Jerry Burns.
Does that note recall anything to you?
No, sir. I don't know what I did.
You don't.
No, sir. I can't recall.
Yeah. I noticed one clipping. I don't know what in the group. It had to do with a December of 1938 Cleveland GI and Belgian girl married by cablegram. Is that part of?
Oh, that was I'd forgotten about that. That was a marriage. What year was it? You said
1948.
1948. Yes, that was a marriage in which a Pawnee GI was in. No, he was in the Cleveland boy, and he was over in Europe somewhere, and his fiancée was a Belgian girl, and she was here.
That was Sergeant Basil Martin.
Oh, was it? I couldn't remember the name. Well, anyway, we married him by cablegram.
Is that the same Basil Martin who is now with OG&E in Oklahoma City?
I couldn't tell you. It's possible that it
There
was.
is Basil Martin.
I didn't. I don't know. I really.
Well, it seems like they might be, because I know Basil Martin.
Well, you asked him if he's ever married a Flemish wife.
He would be about the age that he probably would have married about that time. And he's with the engineering department of OG&E in Oklahoma City.
It's possible. It's the same. Possible same thought.
I don't see him very often, but the next time I see him, I'll ask. The what?
I don't recall. There was some question about it, and they remarried when they got home, or something. I don't know what it's all about.
Yes. But were you the judge on? In other words, were you the marrier by cablegram in this case?
Yes.
You were handled that by cable. So
I don't know how authentic it was, but it served the purpose, I think, until he came back.
Yes. At least it wasn't challenged.
No, that's right.
Let's see. I was looking now in the Selective Service System, the 50th anniversary recognition. What is this? It's a letter from Herbert Hope in 1970.
I was a Pawnee County, I believe they call him, advisor to the boys that were drafted, and I served in that capacity from the first day until the last. Now, what that was is I assisted, and my office helped assisted draft. What do you call them when they're drafted?
Well, they're draftees.
Draftees. Assisted draftees in preparing their various forms and questionnaires and all the things attached to their going into military service. Now, we did that all during the war, and, well, prior to the war and after the war, when it was necessary.
I wonder, I'd like at this point maybe to ask Ms. Palmer, who's with us, to maybe suggest a question or anything that we might ask that we may have missed talking about.
He isn't really up there because we just haven't had the time.
Yeah.
The letters and things of that kind. A while ago I started to say something I thought was really, if he had forgotten, it would be amusing, but I can't, it's not hitting me right now. Something that you asked him a while ago and I was trying to think he's forgotten about. I'm sorry.
Why don't you tell about your children, where they are? You mentioned a boy. One
Tell
son.
him about it.
We have one son, Stephen Scott Palmer. He's in the military. He's a Marine, and at present time he's stationed in Kansas City, and he went into the service, joined the Marines in 1960. I believe he said 67. And was shipped out for foreign service. He spent a year and then came back and was married. He has 2 children. And the year before last, he spent another year overseas. I think they send the officers over about every once out of their 5 years or something like that. I don't know exactly what it is. I think they have a 5-year, 6 or 7 year tour at home, and then they spend a year, 2 years, 3 in the foreign service. And that's just about it. I'm sorry I haven't been able to.
Oh, this is
I'm sorry I haven't been able to tell you a big one, you know.
Oh,
About how I discovered Pawnee County and
No, you've told me a lot that's very interesting, and I think that to me, the insight into the problems and how they're overcome on, where you have a handicap and where you have deal with it in such an important position as a judge is quite interesting and quite.
see, I spent. Someone asked me the other day some of the same question, and I said, "Well, let me put it this way, and I can shorten it up." I dealt with the headaches and the heartaches of my people of Pawnee County for all those years, and they were very pleasant years. Where there was times when things were sad, but more or less it was a very pleasant tenure in office.
Well, this has been wonderful. Do you think of anything else, Miss Palmer?
I was just trying, I guess.
Well, this is very good.
Well, you know, it's rather difficult for me for you to sit here and me to tell you, for you to tell me all those things.
Well, I certainly appreciate it.
Now, I could, for instance, cases, I'd have to go and see. You get to the point where, in other words, I'm going to ask you who you interviewed 5 years ago, and you say, "Well, I remember the fellow," and that's about all.
Well, most cases are not really of historical impact anyway. Most cases deal with families and deal with individuals and corporations and so forth, and have no great historical impact anyway.
I would like to have. In fact, I thought a few I might tell you, but I thought, no, that wouldn't work because he might check up and find out that I didn't discover Pawnee County.
One thing that I know, because I've been his wife and seen him for 1st of September will be 45 years, is that by watching him and paying attention to him, I was totally aware of his sufferings and his mental anguish over young people. That really was his main concern. He said,
I think
and there are very, very few young people that, because of his lack of concern for them, ended up in a reformatory or something more severe. So I know how the person
those
felt.
are the cases that were extremely difficult because you're always afraid you might do something which might hurt down through the years. I never sent a boy to an institution unless it was absolutely impossible to keep him at home, because I knew the minute I did, we'd have a candidate for McAllister, and we've got a bunch of them that saved. I can tell you some right now that you know that I wouldn't tell you, that we saved that are in public office today, see? And I quite often meet people. I quite often visit with people that I had dealings with as juveniles. I've forgotten about them, sir. And every once in a while I receive letters from kids that we had in court 30, 40 years ago. Tell me how they're getting along, what you're doing, and it's quite rewarding. And, well,
this is an interview with Judge Palmer. Well, we appreciate it very, very much. Thank you very much.